is your no bullshit guide to a happier life. Quick, but not necessarily easy tips to help you to squeeze every last drop of enjoyment out of your business and your life. My name is Helen Calvert. I'm a coach, a business owner and a parent, and I'm so happy to be here with you. I do swear occasionally, as the title suggests, so pop in your headphones if I'm not safe for little ears. Ready to go? Let's do this. This episode is sponsored by Adrian Ashton, an untypical enterprise consultant helping people and organisations deal with uncertainty. After reading business in Cambridge, Adrian worked with one of the top 100 PR consultancies in the UK before taking on various management roles within a wide variety of social enterprises, community organisations, and more traditional enterprise support bodies. These experiences enabled him to turn around an ailing specialist social enterprise support agency into a nationally recognised body and gained him recognition as an authority on social enterprises from local, regional and national organisations, including the DTI and Bank of England. Described by some clients as a tiger-striped chaise longue with pink flamingo cushions, Adrian has used this position to deliver support to local groups and national projects to high acclaim. He is also working to better raise the profile, understanding and support for the hundreds of thousands of unpaid carers who are also running their own businesses, but who are otherwise struggling in silence. The appreciation he receives has not only been from the direct individuals and communities his work has impacted upon, but others, including support agencies and international governments. It has also led to his being invited to be an occasional writer for national and regional publications, and he accidentally became global best-selling author with a book that suggests imposter syndrome is a superpower. Interested in working with Adrian? Head to adrianashton.co.uk or check out the show notes for this episode to find out more. Hello, and welcome to this episode where I'm going to be talking about healthcare. Why on earth am I talking about healthcare? Well, of course, with it being season 5, where I am exploring the autistic experience of being in this world, I am going to be talking about healthcare as a particular area where I have found lots of challenges when it comes to being autistic. Now, this episode is going to be a little bit different for me, not necessarily for you, we'll see, but it's different for me because most of the time when I talk about different topics, I have kind of figured them out. I definitely don't have all the answers, far from it, but I've kind of figured out what I want to say, what I want to tell you, what I want you to take away from this. Whereas when it comes to my experiences with healthcare, it's very triggering. I'm kind of still very much in it. There's a lot of unresolved stuff from my past. So yeah, we're just going to see how this goes. If I completely lose the plot, bear with me. The first thing I want to say is that, of course, this episode could actually be about any big institution. I, fortunately, so far in my life, I've had hardly any dealings with the police or the legal system, but I'm sure that the autistic experience of that will have lots of crossover with what I'm going to say about healthcare. I've also been very fortunate in that my children's school, or schools plural now, are absolutely fantastic at looking after my kids and helping them because they're both neurodivergent. But I know for a fact that plenty of people have terrible experiences with schools, which are, of course, another type of institution. So it is hard for institutions and the people who work in them to get things right for everybody. I understand that. But I'm focusing on healthcare because it's the one where I have had the most challenges. So, where on earth shall we start? Well, let's start with just my early experiences. I'm not going to go chronological. I said to you, didn't I, that this is going to be, my brain is just trying to figure this out, how I want to talk to you about this. And it's so vulnerable. Trying to dive into something that is so difficult. But why is it difficult? It's difficult because I have had numerous experiences of healthcare that have been traumatic. Why is something traumatic? How about we start there? I know a lot of you, and as I've said with this season, you don't have to be autistic to resonate with this, because I know a lot of you will have medical trauma. If you have ever had a baby, you are at significant risk of birth trauma, because the way maternity services go are just, that's a whole other, not even a whole other podcast, that's a whole other season, that's a whole other thing. So I know a lot of you will also have trauma from being in the healthcare system. You may have had different conditions you've had to have dealt with. You may have ongoing issues. Why is something traumatic? It's not necessarily traumatic because of what happened. So some of you will have had dreadful experiences that anyone can see were terrible. That's not been my experience. My experience has been that I have not been supported when very, very frightened. And that is something that will always be traumatic. So if you are frightened, activated, dysregulated, anxious, very unhappy, and you're not supported in that, you're basically ignored, left to it, no one cares, maybe you're gaslit, maybe you're told there's nothing wrong, that will most likely lead to trauma, kind of regardless of the situation. Whereas if you've been through something really, really difficult, if you've been well supported, you may come out of it without trauma. So I have been through some traumatic times in healthcare, and it's always been because of lack of communication. When you go into a hospital, they tell you nothing. Or certainly this was my experience in my late teens and early 20s. They tell you nothing. So I was shown to whatever bed I was supposed to be in, and I wasn't told any of the rules. Now, as an autistic person, I need to know all of the rules, and I need to know how to get my needs met. Otherwise, I am completely at a loss and utterly terrified. I didn't know whether I was allowed to leave the bed space. I didn't know where the toilet was. I didn't know if I was allowed to eat and drink when I wanted to, or if that food and water had to be provided by the nurses. I didn't know if I could go to the hospital cafe. I didn't know where the hospital cafe was. So just the basics. We're not even talking about anything to do with my health, right? Just the basics. This was back in the days you were told you weren't allowed a mobile phone in hospital, so I was cut off from anyone safe. This is actually harder than I thought it would be recording this episode, because there's a lot I can't even say, but you're given no information whatsoever. Then you're given absolutely no information about the things that they do to you. So if you've had a cannula, or for my US listeners, an IV put into your hand or your arm so that they can hook up fluids and give injections and different things, they would put a cannula into the back of my hand, which is horrific. And they didn't tell me what it was. So I thought I had a metal needle fixed into my vein. So I couldn't move my hand. I certainly couldn't make a fist because I thought it would pop out. No one told me that it's a plastic tube that they then insert needles in and out of. Nobody told me that it wouldn't be a problem if I used my hand. Nobody told me that you can actually take the flipping thing out. I've seen it on TV where people rip things out and discharge themselves from hospitals. And I'm thinking, my God, no one ever told me I could do that. They tell you absolutely nothing. And then when you behave in a way that isn't what they expect or what they want, they get cross. This has been my experience. Now, what has been different for me is the fact that my youngest has a congenital heart defect. So he had 3 open heart surgeries before he was 5 years old. Obviously, at the start of that, I was not in a good place because I had to deal with a lot of healthcare. But what it did for me was it means that I now speak NHS. I speak healthcare. I understand. So if I go into a healthcare setting now, I know loads of what's going on. I had to have an ECG the other day, again, for my American listeners, an EKG. And I'd seen one done before, loads of times, which is a good thing because they didn't really explain it. Things have improved. Things definitely have improved. I do get things better explained to me these days. I don't know whether that's because I'm older or whether things have just improved. I don't know whether teenagers and 20-year-olds still get treated like crap. But yeah, I know things now. So it's a lot less stressful because I feel like I already have knowledge of the rules and things I can and can't do. But, still there are things that are said that turn out to be choices that you wouldn't have a clue were choices if you didn't already know a little bit. I went for a CT scan the other day, and very, very nice people. They were absolutely lovely. But the student nurse told me to put a gown on. And years ago, I would have put a gown on and then been unbelievably uncomfortable, vulnerable. It's a terrible power dynamic when they basically put on a flimsy gown and you're in your underwear, or sometimes not even in your underwear. It absolutely changes the power dynamic, and I will not accept it anymore. So I asked why I needed a gown. And she said, you can't have metal in the CT scanner. I said, well, I've got metal on my jeans, so how about I just take my jeans off? What about your bra? Well, I'm wearing a sports bra, there's no metal in it. Oh, okay, that's fine, just take your jeans off. Right, so I then get into the room. Turns out I didn't need to take my jeans off, I just needed to open them, slightly shift them down my hips a tiny bit. I was still wearing all of my clothes. And yet, if I hadn't questioned it, I'd have been in a gown. Why am I in a gown? A gown is unbearably awful. So, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say question everything, for a start. Anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, question it, request the rules. And I'm sure this counts for people who aren't autistic as well. I can't imagine many people are just fine in a situation where they know nothing and scary things are going to happen to them. But question everything and also make a fuss. I say to everybody, certainly everyone I know who's neurodivergent, make sure you make a big fuss, because people in healthcare have no idea how distressing healthcare is, and they will assume you're fine unless you make a fuss, preferably burst into tears. They seem to understand tears. It baffles me that they imagine you're fine. They imagine that parents of children having open heart surgery are fine unless you actually make a fuss, because it's every day to them, I guess. So you have to be very clear that you're distressed, even though it would be basically obvious to anyone that you would be. Now, I did get a story from my boyfriend the other day that is kind of from the other side, if you like. He is a paramedic, and he also does shifts in his local emergency room, A&E for the Brits, ER for the Americans. And he was trying to get bloods from a patient. I'll try not to sort of give too many details away, but he was trying to get bloods from a patient. A nurse had already tried. This patient was young. And the nurse was basically cross because this patient just didn't want to cooperate. And Alex was kind, patient, explained what was happening, walked them through it, got it done. And the patient's parent was unbelievably grateful for his patience. And he, like me, was angry because to him, no one should have to be pathetically grateful for basic humanity. So there are many, many healthcare professionals who understand this, and I hope that they can be encouraged to train the ones who don't. What else do I want to say? Well, as well as a complete lack of explanation of anything, you also get asked really stupid questions, which for autistic people are pretty unbearable. Rate your pain 1 to 10. What a stupid question. How do I know what my 9 is compared to someone else's 9? How do I even know what scale we're using? How on earth do I rate my pain? I find that question absolutely, and it's so distressing because you want to get it right. What if you get it wrong? What if you get it wrong and you don't get enough pain relief, or you get too much? What if you get it wrong? When did these symptoms start? So it turns out, again, Alex has explained this to me, bless him. It turns out what they want to know is, did it start today or have you had it for months? But they say, when did these symptoms start? And so I panic because I don't know what date they started. I didn't make a note. I didn't realise I needed to. They weren't a problem until I'd had them for however long. I also find it very difficult to remember timelines of things like this. So again, I panic because what if I get it wrong and then get the wrong treatment? They don't explain what information they need, and they don't explain how important or not important that information is. And then my final sort of area that I want to have a little rant about is when these things are raised, and this is, as I say, true of any institution or any group of people really, when you raise these issues, instead of being heard and somebody saying, yes, I can see how distressing that must be, what you get is an explanation of why they do things the way they do them. Well, that's great. Now I understand why you have all these policies and procedures, but I still don't have anything to do with my distress. What would you like me to do with my distress? You haven't heard me or validated me or understood me. All you have done is explain to me, possibly quite patiently, why you do X, Y, Z the way you do it. Well, that's great, but I'm still really distressed by it. So what are we going to do about that? And this is an issue for autistic people and neurodivergent people and people in general, I suspect, which is that somebody can be totally reasonable and logical and do things right. You don't have to do something wrong in order to cause harm. So as a healthcare professional, you could do everything that is in the policy and seems like the right thing to do and it makes sense to you, and it can still cause distress. And we need to accept this and understand it and not be defensive about it. Because someone being distressed doesn't necessarily mean that's your fault, as in you should have done something different, but it does mean that you need to listen and understand and consider maybe how things could be different, or at the very least, then listen and validate so that distressed person doesn't become a traumatized person. I'm pretty uncomfortable about this episode because it does not feel as cohesive and coherent as other ones I've done, but I promised that this season would be real and raw and authentic. And that is my breathless little rant about the things that I feel I can say. As I say, I've had experiences that I can't even really talk about. To try to bring it together, I would say that the single most important thing I have discovered for anyone who is neurodivergent and is going to be in a situation they don't have control over, so this is true of aeroplane travel as well, is get yourself a sunflower lanyard. I got mine in Tesco's. I think I just went to customer services and asked for one. I don't think I even necessarily had to pay for it as far as I remember. And then the little insert that says I am autistic, you can order that online. Get yourself a sunflower lanyard, because if you wear that to hospital, to the airport, wherever else you find you struggle, you do get treated better, which is wrong. We should all be treated with kindness and basic humanity, but you do get treated better. There is more patience, there is more understanding. Make as much fuss as you can, because people generally want to be kind and helpful, but they don't always understand how to be, and they don't always understand that you're in distress, especially if, like me, when you're distressed, you shut down. So, what I would absolutely love at the end of that somewhat rambly, somewhat confused, very ranty, quite triggered little episode is I would love to hear everyone else's experiences. This is a conversation that I am passionate about opening up. So please drop me some feedback. You can have a look in the information on this episode in the show notes to see how to contact me, how to join my Facebook group where we can have these discussions. But please send me your thoughts, and hopefully together we can have a coherent conversation about neurodivergence and healthcare. But until next time, let's be excessively kind to ourselves if we are going to be in any of these settings. And hopefully we can squeeze a little bit of even maybe enjoyment out of these experiences. Speak to you next time. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to find out how to work with me or how to get your hands on a copy of my book, you can find all of those links in the info for this episode. My huge thanks to Stephanie Ward of the Spicy Brain Collective for sponsoring the whole of this season of the No Bullshit Guide to a Happier Life. You can also find out more about Steph's collective for neurodivergent business owners via the links in the episode info. See you next time.